All right. Welcome to another episode of The Close Up, a part of the Orlando Magic HQ Network. I'm your host, Stephen Cameron, and today we have a great episode. We got Fawzan Amer. He is an amazing journalist, video analyst for the Six Man Show, and he does a great job because he's one of the few people out there that actually will take down game video and break it down and explain what we are actually seeing. So it's a very different perspective than just the average person that covers the Orlando Magic. And he's someone I have learned a lot from in his short amount of time covering this team. He's only been covering the team for about 2 seasons now, and he's just really great. And so I'm glad to finally have connected with him and just get him on this show and learn a little bit more about the Magic, their playbook. We get pretty deep into the Magic playbook and some of the individual growth we have seen from players so far this season, and just the few preseason games we've had. We recorded our conversation October 21st, Monday, just a few days away from Magic opening night. So we're pretty excited about that. Before we get into the show, the HQ launched our new Patreon program. We did a subscriber program on Instagram and we closed that down. We realized that was not working very well for us. The platform was limiting to the things we wanted to offer. And we relaunched our Patreon program and it's awesome. There's 2 different tiers you can sign up for. So please check out the link in the description. Check it out. We have a $150 Magic Store gift card giveaway that is running right now. If you sign up, you'll be entered in to receive this. We have a $5 tier and a $10 tier. No matter which tier you sign up for, you're entered into the potential $150 gift card giveaway for the Orlando Magic team shop. And yeah, it's just a really great program. There's exclusive content for you. There's the community Discord that we've been building and it's super active. I've been on and off it all day. Don't tell my boss. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun with a lot of really cool benefits for you all. So head over to the link in our description and check out our Patreon program. Before we get into this conversation, we do have a couple of sponsors we want to shout out. The first one is BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football, baseball, basketball, just about everything. It is your number one source. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at a weekly prize and share of the $200,000 pot. That's quite the giveaway. When the game's over, head over to their online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, and unwind with one of the over 150 slot games. They got it all, guys. Head to the website today, get in on the action. They also have a great app, which is super functional. I've used both. Bet online. The game starts here. Gamble responsibly. The next thing I'm really excited to share about you all is our partnership with Brandon Kravitz over at 96.9 The Game. Catch Brandon Kravitz on In the Zone 5 days a week, talking about all the hottest sports topics in Orlando and beyond, live on 96.9 The Game and iHeartRadio. Also, if you're looking for more Magic coverage, Brandon will be hosting an extension of his show on game days. It's the In the Zone Game Day Magic from 6 to 6:30 every weekday that the Magic play a game, which is really cool because Orlando Magic HQ has our own spot that you'll be able to catch during his show. So tune in every weekday and listen to Brandon, who does an awesome job covering the show or covering the Orlando Magic on the zone or in the zone on Magic game days from 6 to 6:30 p.m. on 96.9 The Game or iHeartRadio. It's pretty awesome. And if that's not enough, catch bonus content, exclusive interviews about the Magic, sports betting, fantasy, and more on the Zonehead podcast. You can download and subscribe to it wherever you are listening to us right now. All right, everyone. Like I said, we have an awesome conversation. Come on up. Go ahead and give Fawzan a follow and check out his work. It's also linked into the description in the show. What's going on, everyone? Like I said, we got Fawzan Amer with us today, a part of the Six-Man Show. Fawzan, how's it going today? Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate you joining us. How you feeling?
I feel good. I appreciate the invite.
It's a good day to be talking Magic basketball, and I think you and I just kind of landed the perfect timing to be talking to each other, because like today we just got the news that Jalen Suggs got his 5-year, $150 million extension, which we will talk about in a second. But I just feel like everything was meant to be with us talking today. Before we get too deep into that, like, I've respected your work for a while. You work with the Six-Man Show, who does awesome content, and you report on this Magic team, but you bring a perspective that a lot of Magic coverage does not bring right now, whether it's like Orlando Magic or third-party people like us, where you do a lot of game film breakdown, where you'll talk about the different play structures, different play styles. And I just love that you bring that like education to Magic fans online and through the Six-Man Show channels. How did you let's spend like 2 minutes kind of getting into this, because I also know you do film work for a basketball team, and like a college basketball team. Tell us a little bit more about your role with just kind of coming up into the Magic, or into like the basketball world and community, and like how you learned this skill set of what you're seeing and being able to translate it so well verbally through text and video content.
A lot of people don't know this, but I actually went into college as a biology major. That, unfortunately, the year I graduated high school was COVID year. So my entire first year was pretty much me taking prerequisites. And I just didn't really fall in love with biology. Knew it wasn't my calling card pretty much immediately. It was something that I was kind of being forced into, and not something that I wanted to do on my own fruition. So I decided to pivot to. I knew I've always liked sports growing up, but I didn't know if there was a market for me, and I kind of bounced around for a little bit. I worked for the Dallas Mavericks Moneyball. I wrote for them for a little bit, and then I wrote for the Hornets Fansided uh, page in 2022, which was my sophomore year in college. And then a Zoom call in October of 2022 was where I met Dante Marchitelli, who is the sideline reporter and the host of the Orlando Magic. And just in the conversations with him, I was covering the Hornets at the time, and the Hornets were slated to play the Orlando Magic the next week. And kind of did something I probably shouldn't do, but the conversation was flowing so well. Dante just seemed like such a nice person that I decided to throw a shot in the basket to see if I could make something. And he allowed me to come to Orlando and cover the game using him as a credential. And throughout my entire time in Orlando, I got to meet very few people because Dante was so popular, and I never realized how popular of a person he was. But every single turn we took, there was a fan or a security guard or a player he would spend 20 minutes talking to. And the one person I was able to actually get in contact with that day was someone by the name of Jonathan Osborne. And a few weeks after I departed Orlando, I decided that the sports thing just wasn't really working out for me. And I was pretty much ready to call it quits. And I had texted Dante prior to doing so, and he urged me to reach out to that person that had grabbed the phone number of that day, who was Jonathan Osborne. One thing led to another, and he brought me on to the Six-Man Show. And I wanted to be smart about it this time. I wanted Orlando to have a voice. I know it's a pretty small market team, but they were on a pretty significant losing streak when I joined. They were 5-20, and Markelle Fultz was out. I believe Wendell Carter Jr. was also out. So I knew I was jumping at a pretty good time, but I wanted to bring a different element because the only person who covered the team at the time was Kobe Price. And Magic fans were just so lured into him that there wasn't really another party that I felt like that could do something. So I wanted my own niche. I wanted to be my own person. Just kind of scrolling through Twitter, scrolling through what everyone was doing on Magic Twitter, I noticed that an element removed was film breakdowns. And fortunately, that was right in my ballpark, and kind of started doing a few film breakdowns. Got a retweet from Kobe Price, the man, the myth, the legend himself, and everything's kind of skyrocketed from there. And it's actually led me to getting an assistant video coordinator job for a D1 basketball team at the University of North Texas, and I'm a senior at the University of North Texas as well. So
That's pretty awesome. It's funny how like one phone call or conversation can just lead to like a runway that just like completely changes your trajectory of that, that next little bit of future. And yeah, Dante's the man. Like, can't meet a nicer guy than that guy to give you an intro into the journalism world and how you've been able to like meet and like network that way and land with another great organization like the Six Man Show. And now your job, which is phenomenal. Now let's talk a little bit about some current Magic stuff. Like I said at the beginning of the show, we had some awesome news today. We had Jalen Suggs. Today was the rookie extension deadline for for the Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner rookie class. And, obviously we got the Franz Max extension early in the summer before the Olympics started. And it was like kind of coming down to the line. There's quite a few people, and then they all just sort of like rolled in within about an hour's timeline. But there was some people getting pretty nervous that the Jalen Suggs contract may not get done because of how fast we saw the Franz Wagner extension get done early in the year. How were you feeling coming into today? Were you feeling confident that an extension was going to get done, or did you think they might, go into the next season and discuss it next offseason during restricted free agency?
I was pretty confident. I mean, throughout his tenure in Orlando, Jalen Suggs has routinely went out of his way to state his love and affection for the fan base and the city, as well as his desire to remain with the blue and white. So prior to today, I couldn't really speak on where those conversations were, but I had a pretty good idea they were trending in the right direction. And I actually had my reservations earlier of signing Jalen Suggs, but actually watching that Philadelphia preseason game where Suggs had posted 4 steals and a block, I realized that I think it would be best for both parties to go ahead and mend the deal immediately. And I want to kind of refrain from the NBA world for just a second. I mean, in the NFL, there's been so many injuries from Brandon Ayuk to Deshaun Watson. And I always think that anytime you're paying someone that kind of money going into their next season where they can be a restricted free agent, Jalen Suggs' play style is so chaotic that I just thought it would just be better for Orlando to lock him up. That way you're not losing that chaotic desire that he possesses in order to stay healthy and not lose out on multiple millions of dollars. So I was pretty happy that both he and Jeff Waltman in the front office were able to get across the finish line in a timely fashion.
Yeah, it seems like for both sides there was incentives to want to get a deal done, right? Like I was talking to somebody in the last couple of weeks, I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, and they kind of put it in this perspective. They're like, you know what? They probably met earlier in the summer, and one party came up with a number, the other party came up with the other number, and they were pretty far off. And they said, you know what? Probably we're pretty far away right now, but let's have this conversation on October 20th, 21st, and see where we can get closer in line, kind of see where the market goes. And we'll pick it up at that point. And then today was that point, right? Is the deadline. They had to pick it up today. I'm sure they were in conversations a little bit over the last couple of days and maybe had some touch points over the last couple of weeks, months. But today was the day they were going to like figure out the X's and O's and dot the I's and figure that stuff out. And it's just, it's nervous because I don't think a lot of people understand how this process actually works and why a decision for someone who is not clearly a max player or not clear a vet minimum player or an MLE player where they're kind of in that gray, there's so much more nuances to figuring out an extension and what that next contract looks like. Particularly one where first couple of years, there's some injuries to that story. And then they have a phenomenal year, their third year. So like it's probably not always that easy to find the right balance point. But it seems like they did. It seems like, especially when you consider the market, like a few other contracts we saw today. Jalen Johnson was another one for 5 for 150. Sengun was 5 for 185, which was that's a lot in my opinion, but great. Jalen Green, 3 years, player option on the third year for 106. And then Trey Murphy, probably the closest type of player to Jalen Suggs to an extent, with 4 over 112, which is like right there. If you want to compare that contract, that's like 28 million versus 30 million, very similar to Jalen Suggs. When it comes to that 5 over 150, that $30 million annual salary that Jalen Suggs is going to get, is that kind of the ballpark you thought he was going to get? I know we got those rumors earlier. I think the report was from Mark Stein that was the number he was kind of asking for or searching for. Does that surprise you at all?
No, it doesn't really surprise me at all. I thought that Jalen Suggs could have waited another season. I know he's been pretty adamant about filling that void that Orlando has by operating as an elite guard and kind of creating the offense from his own hands, and then demanding more money the following offseason. But I'm not really surprised, given that a deal was done during this deadline, that it was what it is, which is, I believe, $30.1 million. Just a little bit above his asking price of $30 million.
Yeah, and I wasn't too surprised by it either. I was kind of guessing it was going to be somewhere between like that 26, 27 and like 31, 32 range. So 30 is in that window, I was thinking the whole time. But I'm pulling up Spot Track right now because I want to, unless you know this, I want to explain to people how this will actually affect the cap. The team's cap space. Give me 1 second, people. I'm literally pulling it up right now because they just updated it. So if you don't use Spot Track, use this site, people. It's pretty amazing. So what his contract actually looks like is not this season. Obviously, he's still on his rookie contract, but next season his contract will start at my page just reloaded. His contract's going to start at 25 million. Then it's going to jump by the 5th season, get up all the way up to 34 million. Average salary will be 30 million per year, and it's really 16% of the team's available cap space, and then will decline all the way to to the 29 30 season, his 5th season. It'll jump down to roughly 15.13% of the team's cap space. So it sounds like a lot, but when you bring it down into percentage of cap, it's not all that crazy when you consider like Franz is making 25% of the team's cap space. And then you got Paulo when he gets his extension, that's going to be 25, potentially even 30% of the team's cap space if he hits all NBA. So 16% is it's pretty manageable for I think a player like Jalen Suggs, who's going to be a part of this team for a very long time. Yeah, with this Magic team, like, they kind of wrapped up all the question marks going into the season. I mean, I know they have still 1 two-way spot left to fill, but they've extended they extended Franz, they extended Suggs. Like, this team is kind of set now, and their core is going to be set for a long time. I don't think the negotiations with Paul are going to be that challenging. So, cool. Let's talk about some Magic offense. This is what I really wanted to bring you on the show about. Learn a little bit more about their playbook because you have such a good mind for that. Let's just start off on a basic fundamental level of we've had Coach Mosley now for going into his 4th year, and he's been implementing a system for these young guys to learn, right? And obviously the system evolves a little bit over time as players get better and personnel on the team changes, but there's still a pretty solid foundation of the core principles that he has been installing onto this team. For the casual fan that might just watch a ball go up and down the court and see if it goes into the basket, can you kind of explain what the core principles on the offensive side of the ball are for the Orlando Magic?
So yeah, I'll kind of dial it back for 1 second before I go into Orlando specifically. But I think just from a bird's eye view, like, most NBA offensive concepts look the same, Orlando's included. Each team works towards the same shot from the same spaces on the floor, streamlined by the same idea of efficiency. But there are like some slight variations based on personnel, of course, of how you can optimize those ends. Which every offense has an ecosystem and a life of its own. And I think last season, that sudden shift in Orlando's play callers caused by Nate Tibbetts' departure when he took that head coaching job to the Phoenix Mercury, kind of disrupted that pretty heavily. And then you pair that with the injury to your starting point guard, Markelle Fultz, who's your lead play caller. A lot of those deteriorations within the offensive scheme kind of stem from those two big components almost immediately. And then once you kind of understand the element of why everything looks so discombobulated and so deconstructed, which I just outlined, then you kind of go into Jesse Mermis, who took over that role. He wasn't really given much time to kind of make his own offensive playbook, just kind of thrown in there kind of randomly. And then what a lot of people don't realize is Jamal Mosley also took it upon himself to call some of the team's offense. And this is a defensive coordinator in Dallas, and in Orlando, he's routinely called their defense. So those three components, from Jamal Mosley taking it upon himself to Jesse Mermis taking over for Nate Tibbetts, and then losing your lead play caller, kind of played a pretty significant factor in Orlando's offensive structure, looking the way that it did.
Yeah, now, I mean, didn't they lose Tibbetts like the first week of training camp? It wasn't even like they had time to go into it. Like, I imagine they're like, oh, sweet, we've had a week of practice with you and now you're leaving us. Cool. I guess maybe we keep going with the system you've been installing and kind of make tweaks. Like, probably it was really a big cluster, if I imagine. Like, I bet it was pretty chaotic.
Yep. And that, I think a lot of people just completely disregarded that aspect of it. And then once you kind of dive back into Orlando's playbook for last season, they had pretty good offensive structure. Like, a lot of their plays that they ran, which was, I'll list out their 5 most called plays, which was number 1 is 77. It's a double drag play, which is 2 consecutive ball screens. The number 2 play call is stagger away. The number 3 is angle pop. They run wide. They run a lot of things that you see a lot of the premier offenses run. But what separates Orlando from a Golden State Warriors type of offense is Golden State has an end goal to their scheme. Orlando's is merely Paolo Banchero is going to come off this double drag and we're going to play through that. Golden State is you're going to come off this double drag and then you're going to find Curry or Klay Thompson in the corner, or you're going to find Jordan Poole. They have an end game of who is going to take that shot when that play call is called. Orlando doesn't have that. So from a half-court perspective, when that discombobulates, the team just wasn't running many complex secondary actions to alter the defensive structure opposing teams were based in. So, like I said, you pair that with the loss of their primary offensive caller, Nate Tibbetts. And then, like I said, they didn't have many secondary ball handlers either. Someone who can create their shot off the dribble, aside from Cole Anthony, Paolo, Franz, and to a degree, we saw Jalen Suggs do it. So if their primary action didn't work, you were kind of just left with a Paolo Banchero ISO, which was another direct result of his poor efficiency that gets talked about a lot on different platforms. And then I think this season, Anthony Black, Jet Howard, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope help in that regard, because all those 3 individuals are connective passers, and having more guys on the floor who can create advantages and provide relief options is just going to do this offense pretty well.
Now, when you talk about, I remember you mentioning this like in the middle of the season, where you talked about the lack of second action within a play, and just kind of seeing what's there, and if they can take advantage of it, they will. If not, it just kind of defaults to Apollo ISO. Was the biggest factor of that, you think, just continued like lack of ball handling on the floor, where, you know, Markelle Fultz being in the lineup, or do you think, and like just also lack of capable ball handlers, or do you think it had more to do with just like a learning development with the team being so young, or is it just like a mixture of both? Like, what causes a team to be, I mean, it's probably a mixture of both, and this might be a simple question, but like, what in your opinion caused that to be such a big issue for this team to where they were just constantly having to default to ISO?
So the reason they were having to default to a lot of ISOs, I'll kind of start with the starting lineup. So once Markelle Fultz got injured, you put Anthony Black in that starting lineup, and I've kind of alluded to this in multiple articles of mine and multiple tweets of mine. Anthony Black saw the fewest play calls of any player on the Orlando Magic, including Jet Howard in his sparring minutes. What I'm trying to say is Jet Howard, in his garbage time minutes, ended up seeing more offensive play calls for himself than Anthony Black did. Now, when you put Anthony Black in the starting lineup, what Orlando did is they started throwing him in the corner and just having him sit there as an isolated duck. And then it's kind of, we're going to play 4-on-5. And if the play doesn't work, we're going to kick it out to Anthony Black for a kick out 3-pointer, or Gary Harris kick out 3-pointer. And that structure offensively wasn't working because teams came in with their game plan of, we're going to switch to blitz Franz, Wagner, and Paolo Banchero, and we're going to live with Orlando hitting shots over us. And it was a consistent theme of where Orlando just wasn't able to connect from downtown from those kickouts and spray out 3-pointers. And as good as it is to create 3-pointers from spray outs and kickouts, a lot of people don't understand. When Gary Harris, I believe Gary Harris went 7 for 22 in Cleveland in that playoff series. I don't know if I'm saying that number correctly. Regardless, he struggled pretty immensely.
Something within that space, yeah.
He struggled pretty. Yeah, he struggled pretty immensely. And one of my biggest coaching icks is when you know a player's bread and butter offensively is shooting the basketball from three-point range, and all you're doing all night long is just, I want you to sit in this corner for me and be ready to shoot upon a catch and release. That's just not how you coach basketball. That is not how basketball works. If basketball was that simple, we'd have 4 guys who are shooters and 1 point guard on every single team. I never saw Jamal Mosley actually create a look for Gary Harris or any of his shooters throughout the season, or really throughout that playoff series in Cleveland. And that was really where the demise for Orlando started.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, when you, and there's a lot of context to that, right? Like, it's not just Jamal Mosley's fault. Like, we know they had a big disruption to training camp with their offensive coordinator leaving. They've had, injuries they didn't expect and things like that, to where maybe he didn't trust calling specific plays and allowing them to come to fruition. But now we're transitioning to, a team this year with, it's clear they're not relying on Markelle Fultz anymore. They're asking Jalen Suggs to hold a bigger role as a ball handler for this team. They are asking and expecting Anthony Black to be a bigger ball handler and playmaker for this team, and expanding his role dramatically, where, last year, like you said, he didn't have any plays called for him. They also didn't really allow, a lot of times with rookies, they keep them on such a very, very small focus of responsibility. Okay, yes, offensively, we want you to stand in the corner. If you get an opportunity, cut. But it's like, that's kind of, and then they'll expand their role as they learn and develop over the years, right? And so this is the next stage in his development. They're going to expand his role a bit more, ask more of him. They're asking more of Paolo and Franz with their ball handling situation. Small sample size, we lost a game in preseason, but from what you have seen so far, we were recording this on October 21st on Monday. Magic's first game is on Wednesday, listeners, for you hearing that. When you take what you've seen so far, how have what you've seen in preseason, how does it compare to last year? And with evolution, with optimization of players, what are you seeing so far in the preseason with our core players, obviously?
Core players?
Or just in general, I'm saying core, because I don't know really what you can pull from, the guys that are on Exhibit 10 players, Exhibit 10 deals versus, the 15-man roster. But, whatever you've been just dissecting that you think will translate into this season, like what are you kind of seeing offensively? That just might be different from last year.
So yeah, one of the clear differentiations from last season to this season is Orlando's usage of Anthony Black. I know both of us had just touched on it recently of him kind of being thrust in that corner in that starting unit. And I think I believe this is what Jamal Mosley's interpretation for that was, which is I don't want to take away the basketball from the hands of Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero and allow Anthony Black to facilitate my offense in by replacing Markelle Fultz. And I think that was the wrong mentality to have because Anthony Black does so many other things well that we just never really saw Orlando even try to really experiment aside from like a 2 to 3 game sample size. And the dimension I'm talking about is screen assist. People don't understand, like Anthony Black is a big guard. He is massive. He is 6'7", 6'8". And another added dimension that gets kind of swept under the rug is in terms of his addition to that offensive unit was weaponizing him in inverted screens for Paolo Banchero, which is, for people who don't know what an inverted screen is, it's a guard setting a screen for a big. And Anthony Black, when he was allowed to screen for Paolo Banchero, was very, very effective. I don't have the numbers in my pocket at the moment, but no guard in the Magic other than Anthony Black really came close to sniffing such a greater points per possession number when he was allowed to set those wedge screens or pinning screens. So I think that implementation in and of its own is going to be critical for their potential playoff success if they want to advance and compete in the second round this season. And then from a ball handling perspective, Anthony Black's comfortability and communication with the coaching staff have quickly become evident through 3 preseason games. At least for me, they have, especially during the team's preseason finale Friday night. I know a lot of people got really excited to see him have 8 assists. So I actually decided to write an article about that, which will be released tomorrow morning. But
yes,
but a lot of those assists actually came from the same play. And it is the first time I ever saw Anthony Black spam the same offensive button, but every single possession within that play concept didn't result in the same shot. The first shot was a 3-pointer for Jet Howard. The second shot was a Goga dunk, and then the third shot was Anthony Black keeping it himself. And then the final shot was him actually utilizing both screens for a late dump off. So just his ability to kind of, like, he's maturing with every game. His assists, like even when not recorded on the stat sheet, have come from recognizing the game and seeing the plays that are there and not in advance and not reacting to it. He's gotten so much better at manipulating defenses because he knows what to expect now. And he's not just deciphering, but he's also altering plays from within the same play to create a different outlook paired with an identical result, which is a made field goal.
That's really interesting. And I love that we're going to be able to see that because I think a lot of us wanted that more last year, but we were just kind of like, he wasn't given the opportunity to try it. And, now we are. And that's going to be really fun because, a 6 overall pick's got a lot of upside and they picked him for a reason, probably with some concerns due to, Markelle Fultz up and down health injury and just also his size and ability that comes with that. His defensive upside is insane. Is like a really smart defender. We haven't really talked about defense because we've been focusing on offense, but it's just really cool to like hear how you think he's going to be impacting this team on such a positive note, because I think a lot of people really want that. And we're frustrated at times with him and even Jet not even having much chances last year, which, I mean, that's for different reasons, but it's going to be fun to watch his role just really expand this year. Now, as far as like those secondary actions when a play gets cut off and they just default to ISO, do you think we're going to see a little bit more of that be less because of consistency with coaching going into the training camp and also just like evolution of players' skill sets and development?
Yeah, I think it's what you just said. It's evolutions of players and skill sets. But I think the biggest thing is replacing Gary Harris with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And
Sure.
Pope has played with Jokic. He's played with LeBron. He knows how to complement stars who primarily have the ball in their hands by being a viable spacer on the floor. But not just being a spacer, but also like generating efficient looks off a ball screen or a dribble handoff. Um, and I think a lot of people don't know this, but Orlando's offensive structure has a few commonalities with Denver with the usage of those dribble handoffs. Pope actually connected on 40.2% of his off-movement dribble handoffs last season, which is the 18th best amongst the 77 players who took at least 75 of them. So his ability to be a movement shooter pairs really nicely with one of Orlando's favorite tactics, which is a dribble handoff play called Chicago action. It's a delayed look, which is 5-out formation with your big at the top of the key. And a lot of the times last season when we saw that play, it ended up being Jalen Suggs who would receive the pin down and shoot that three-pointer. And as good as Jalen Suggs was as a three-point shooter last season, within that specific play call, he only made one of his 33 attempts.
Wow.
So I think adding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope into just that premier structure, that offensive play, and then combining it with his ability to screen for Paolo Banchero, to screen for Franz Wagner, and then just kind of play out of those actions will really, and then in addition to having a stable offensive input and voice and Jesse Mermis, will just be so much more helpful and viable for this offense moving forward.
I am. It's funny. He was our biggest addition this offseason, and I feel like he's hardly gotten talked at all about. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Kenny. He's hardly gotten any love. Everyone just talks about Paulo and Franz and Suggs, and all the Magic fans just want to talk about Anthony Black and Jet Howard because they're the young kids. But it's like, man, we got this amazing vet who's got so much experience and so much, very few flaws within his game, within his role within the game. And it's just wild how much, like you just explained, he can unlock, how much I think he can unlock for this team, and just like the overall experience he's going to bring to this locker room too. Defensively, let's just pause there for a moment. The Magic last year had the second best defensive rating in the league at 111.3. They add someone who, in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, to the starting lineup, who is one of the best guard defenders in the league. There's real possibilities that it could be he and Suggs potentially could both make all defensive teams. Now they might cancel each other out a little bit in the voting, but he is that type of talented player. When you look at adding a player like that and then taking our starting shooting guard, who is also a very good defender, and Gary Harris, bringing him to the second unit, what are your thoughts about this team defensively going into this year? Like, what is their, okay, it's kind of hard to say what is your ceiling when your ceiling last year was the second best season defensive team in the league, but just in general, what are your thoughts about this team defensively coming into the season?
My thoughts defensively are Jamal Mosley is going to have a lot of fun, and a lot of opposing offensive coordinators are going to be in hell on a nightly basis. Those are really my thoughts.
It's kind of ridiculous. I mean,
yeah.
Not to cut you off there, but it's like, oh, cool. You could either get picked up by Franz or Suggs. I mean, sorry, Gary Harris, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or Suggs. And if you want to get switched to someone else, cool. You have this 6'10", really, really good wing defender in Franz Wagner ready to pick you up too. It's just it's kind of ridiculous. The perimeter is going to be such a scary place for anyone to live.
Yeah, and their defensive effort against Philadelphia, don't really remember what number they had in their assist total, but a lot of their assists were as a result of deflections, steals, and just kind of pushing the pace offensively. And I think that's another structure that we can kind of tie back into offense. You have this defensive front in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Jalen Suggs, where when you can create those deflection and those steals, you can mitigate the amount of time you're spending in a half-court offensive setting and just play 2-on-1 or 3-on-4 or 5-on-3 and create offensive advantages from that perspective, as opposed to, hey, let's dial everything back out and have X or Y or Z player set the table for us offensively, because it's just not their bread and butter. So I think, in addition to everything that we mentioned earlier, their defensive ability to most likely be able to get more deflections, more steals, and just create havoc on the defensive end will translate into easier, faster, and quicker offensive opportunities in transition.
It's going to be ridiculously fun to watch. I could tell you that much, And then it's cool. We haven't even talked about Jonathan Isaac, who is, at one point of his career had Defensive Player of the Year upside, and still might. He still might. The dude's incredible. Schematically, I kind of want to back off a little bit, bring this conversation a little bit higher. We've talked about Kenny. We've talked about Anthony Black, and a few others. What other individual players have stuck out to you this preseason with the Magic, in good ways and maybe even concerning ways too?
Jalen Suggs, both negatively and positively. And whenever I go into games, I always go into games thinking about how I myself would game plan, and I think that always just gives me an easier way to understand what I'm looking for and like what I'm going to write about or what I'm going to tweet about or what film analysis I'm going to provide the following day. And this offseason, this preseason, I've been really kind of dialed into his lead guard and creation ability. And I was pretty impressed. I was actually pretty impressed in that Philadelphia game, because multiple times, and it was the first time actually I ever saw him slow everybody down offensively and get into the right play call and create advantages, whether that be with the ball in his hands or with him as a screener for Paolo Banchero or running a stack action for Franz Wagner. So just his ability to get everyone on the same page has really stood out to me in that Philadelphia game. And actually going back to that Pelicans game, I tweeted about this actually. There was a play prior to where Suggs turned the ball over, and he was pretty frustrated because he had actually called out the play, and it just didn't work out the way that it was supposed to work out. So on the following possession, it was an ATO, and he made sure Franz Wagner, Jet Howard, and Goga Bitadze understood the play call, and it ended up resulting in his own three-pointer. And I know it's just kind of subtle things within just transferring that everyone understands that, but that growth was something that we just never saw from Jalen Suggs. Throughout his tenure in Orlando, it's always been, how fast can I get up and down the floor and get the ball out of my hands? And it's been sporadic. It hasn't been pretty. It's been rough at times. It's been very, very bad at times. But against Philadelphia, there was a little glimmer of hope where I actually saw his ability to create for the offense. And that growth that he's already shown in less than a calendar year is enough to raise the aspirations of the entire franchise. I mean, this front office has reaped the rewards of patience and internal growth, and it seems they're on the pathway to striking gold once more in both their lead playmakers, Anthony Black off the bench and Jalen Suggs in the starting lineup. And all that's left is really to allow Anthony Black to have the ability to fail in games that matter, and Suggs for that matter, and give both of those guys a structure and the opportunity to grow.
And, they signed Jalen Suggs to a 5-year, $150 million extension because of the growth that he has shown and the faith that they have in him to continue to grow in that manner. And they didn't go sign a veteran point guard. I mean, like, Corey Joseph is there, but, like, outside of that, there's really not too many guys on this roster that can go in and take over if these guys are not holding it together. They will learn through fire this year, and that's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting because it's what this team needs to really see what they have in this young core that they're building. I know we're coming up to time and we're going to wrap it up soon, but let's spend 2 minutes maybe 3 on Franz Wagner and what we have seen from him. Last year he had a pretty awesome season in so many ways, but then the big storyline with Franz outside of his max extension is he's not able to hit the ball right now from deep, from the 3-point line. And it hasn't been that encouraging from the preseason. What are your feelings around Franz right now? And just, is he going to get his shot back together? What are you just like? Should we be concerned? I'm personally not, but there's a lot of people that are. So let's hear what your thoughts are.
I'm actually really, really glad that you actually brought this up. And the reason I say I'm glad is it's just something I spoke about earlier. Every single one of Franz Wagner's attempts in preseason, I believe he's 0-7 through preseason games. Go back and look at every single one of them. Not one of them is a play call. Each one of them is a kick out or a standstill jump shot. And like I said, as good as those are, you have to give your offensive players an ability to showcase himself in advantage standpoints. And I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that through three preseason games. And it's funny because we saw it in Germany. I saw Gordy Herbert draw up a few plays for Franz Wagner, and I'm still waiting for Orlando to do that for him. And I think there's different reasons for why you do that. Number one is, all right, your shot isn't working right now, so what we're going to do is we're going to give you screens to come off of and see if that changes the alteration of the shot, where that shot is coming from, the base. And then another thing it does is it showcases that player's confidence that, hey, I understand you're struggling, but we're going to still draw this play up for you and see if you can't convert or if you can't get out of your slump. And just kind of leaving him high and dry to just kind of create on his own from downtown when it just simply isn't working. The more you do things, the more it isn't. Just because you do things the same way doesn't mean you're going to finally figure it out. I don't expect Franz Wagner to just simply wake up one day and figure out his 3-point shot. I had a different reflection of it following his Germany tenure, where he shot 25% from 3, but the more I see it, the more I look at it, the more I'm just starting to understand the more you do it isn't going to change the result of it. So I like to see Orlando do that. I don't know that I will. I wouldn't hold my breath over it. We'll see what happens throughout the season, but I'm not really very optimistic about a jump shot as of this moment.
Yeah, it's a bit of a concern. I hear two things there. Like, it's like it's just a continued struggle that he's had on, again, not stuff that's drawn up exactly for him, but, still decent looks. And then, it's like we talk about the lack of consistency in the offensive structure last season, and they hired within, and we're still seeing some of those same concerns in preseason. Granted, it's only preseason, but it's like,
I think a lot of it has to do with his mental at this point. And he alluded to it in a press conference. Like, when you miss so many shots, like you do, even when he's open, it just becomes kind of a mental block at that point because you want it to fall so badly that you almost start doing things differently, even though it's not by intention. So for his sake, for Orlando's sake, I do hope it comes. But it's kind of left to be desired at this point. And it's not something I want to really touch on too much of because it's been a continuous from last season to Germany to preseason. So I think we'd be fools to say that it's just going to randomly change come the regular season. Now, if it does, great for Orlando, but I don't think we have been given any sort of indication that it is.
It would be nice. Let's hope we're both wrong and that he figures it out. I mean, I don't know if I'm wrong. I think I'm just kind of neutral. I think he'll figure it out. I don't know. Maybe not. Now you got me second guessing my own thoughts here, but that's why I bring you onto the show so I can learn and get other perspectives. All right. My man Fawzan, this has been Fawzan. I messed that up. Sorry, Fawzan. I have really enjoyed our conversation. I want to bring you on more throughout the season so we can kind of like touch back on this conversation that we had, kind of see how players have been doing, like getting in that more critical like checkpoint with these guys. And obviously, I'm retweeting your stuff pretty regularly. And Magic fans, if you are not following him, what are you doing? You're sleeping under a rock. Please, please, please go give our man a follow. Let everyone know where they can find you, man. Like I know your first account had done really well. Then there was some legal troubles that happened, and you're starting over. We won't talk about that too much, but your new account's great, just as good, if not better, than your old account. Where are the people going to find your work at outside of the 6-man show?
Yeah, so I tried my best to cover the Wagner brothers during the Olympics.
You did great.
And Twitter decided that I didn't do a good enough job. So they removed my previous account from the platform. And I'm not someone who's too hell-bent on followers, but I would really appreciate it if Magic fans would go and follow my new account. I actually have to look up what my username is because I forgot.
I have to do that every time too, even though I've had the same username forever.
It's FAMER and then 2 underscores. So the first initial of my first name, the first initial of my last name, MER __. And I'm trying to level up this season. I'm going to hopefully have an article out every single game to kind of showcase what is really going on throughout the game from an analytical perspective, from a schematic perspective. I expect this offense to be a lot more cohesive. So that should in itself play out to more breakdowns from yours truly. And you can find my stuff at www.sixmanshow.com/Fawzan Amer. And I'll actually have an article out tomorrow morning over Anthony Black. So pretty excited for that.
Make sure you all check into Fawzan Amer's content. All right. He is honestly, I know I've said this multiple times, but he's one of the people that you will get the most education out of, and not just the most, let's talk about these topics of the different storylines. You're going to get data. You're going to understand the game of basketball at a higher level if you follow his content and read his articles. Dude, this has been amazing. Honestly, I've really enjoyed it. The only thing I've not enjoyed is me butchering your name there for a moment, and that's just me being an idiot. So thank you for the time today. Magic fans, thanks for tuning in. First Magic game is coming up in just a few days. This is going to be airing on Tuesday, October 22nd. We have Magic basketball the very next day on Wednesday, so it's going to be pretty awesome. We'll catch you next week on another episode of The Close Up, part of the Orlando Magic HQ Network. Peace.